Casella here, and thank you for joining me on Story Species, Story Medicine. We had a fan-freaking-tastic conference over the weekend. If you didn't have the chance to catch it, make sure you catch the replay. And today we have Michael Kopf with us. He was one of our Dragon speakers. So again, check out my playlist on YouTube. You can find the whole conference, and I even took the time, which really didn't take much time at all. StreamYard is pretty user-friendly, and I was able to take all of the Dragon speakers so you can find their 1-hour presentations. Michael and I having a little laugh because I almost forgot to send him the link for today. And so we got caught up chatting, and then I had to cut Michael off and say, hey, wait, we're going to be going live. So I'm really excited to have him here today because he's published his 5th book now. Let me just show you the little poster I made. So he published his 5th book, Deeper Insights into the Mind of Michael. And I love that picture of him on the book where he's just kind of like, So you know me, I'm full of questions. And let me show you a better look here. I put the link in the comments. So, you know what, as the months go by, sometimes you sell some, sometimes you don't sell some. And Michael's books are selling. And so it's really exciting. If you're not familiar with Michael, let me just read you his biography here. There's always much to say. Michael Kopf is a metaphysical paranormal investigator, author, experiencer, teacher, seeker dreamer, Reiki master, ordained reverend, way shower, and podcast host. Michael has been on a metaphysical journey since childhood. He has had many experiences and learned many lessons on this journey called life. Michael hosts The Energy That Surrounds Us and Riding Through the Unknown. He also co-hosts Paranormal Versus with Kel Ridley and E. Smith. He can be seen on other shows as a guest and or panelist. Michael has an interest in the unexplained and the esoteric. He still occasionally goes on paranormal investigations. Michael is currently embracing his author path as he writes new books. He recently published his 5th book and is working on 2 more. Michael writes his book uniquely, providing information, his personal insights and thoughts, leaving the conclusions for the readers to decide. The topics he chooses interest him and are also topics he hears about from others. Michael enjoys sharing his knowledge and insights. Michael's books are currently available on Amazon.com. And so you can get all 5 books of Michael's on Amazon. And it brings me great pleasure. It's such a thrill. As the months go by, Michael and I getting to know each other more and more. Let me bring Michael to the stage. Hi, Michael. How are you doing? Welcome.
Thank you. And it's good to be back. And you're looking really nice today.
Thanks. You know what? I've got my swimsuit on underneath. So, you're in Texas. It's always warm, right? But for us Canadians, our weather is really flip-flopping. And I'm like, I'm wearing my swimsuits. And today we actually had snow and the window was frozen. I couldn't open it, but I was like, I got my summer wardrobe out and just the odd sweater to get me through.
Hey,
So
no
long
complaints
time
there.
no see, right? You were at the
Yes.
conference. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that before we start taking the deep dive into your book here?
So I presented a topic of the power and mythos of the hero's journey. And I think it's a topic that a lot of people, they talk about or they reference, but they don't really think about what exactly it is. They go, oh, well, you saw in this movie, they did this journey and they did this, or this book does a really great job of, the hero's journey. And everybody thinks it's something exterior, but it's really within, and everybody is the hero and creator of their own journey. And I've been sharing out with some friends of mine the presentation and the links to the other presentations, to your your YouTube site, and everybody has been coming back with me and saying, I just love the way that you expressed the journey, and I love how you made everyone go along with the journey and understand they're the master of it. And that really made my heart and my soul happy, because that was my goal. That's what I wanted, and I was just hopeful at the end that that happened, and all the positive feedback kind of made me feel like I think I did it. I think I got that across, and I just again want to thank you for putting that on. And I also have to say I love the synchronicity, because you said promise of spring was the focus of this one, and I felt like now when I think about it, I was like, man, what better time than the spring to do heroes journeys and start some. And so I was like, wow, I just realized the synchronicity of that as well.
Wow, there's just so much to say, right? And I I wanted to have the conference this Saturday because the new moon is today or tomorrow, and I wanted to have it in the darkness of the new moon. Ideally, I wanted to have it in December in the season of dreams in the new moon, but then I would have to wait until next year, right? And so it's just been such a thrill. And you nailed it. The hero's journey. I don't think you could ever go wrong talking about it. And you know what? You could have a million presenters presenting on the hero's journey, and everybody's presentation would sound different. It would be unique, and that's the power of it. And the vulnerability of you sharing out, and the cute picture of you as a child, right? Too cute. Um, I think as soon as that picture went live, everybody was distracted with the cuteness overload. And even just, you know what, after all these years, looking at a picture of yourself, just a little guy there in elementary school, and really acknowledging that if it wasn't for everything, and I mean everything that he went through, you simply wouldn't be the person you are today. And often we feel like we're not good enough, like we let the inner child down, when in truth, we are top hero, top status celebrity for the inner child. And it's us, the adults, that need to step into that a bit more. What are your thoughts on that? Like when you look at a picture of yourself, do you get what I'm saying?
I do, and one of the things that's kind of funny is when I look at pictures of me in my past to current, I look at and I'm like, wow, my face has changed some, or oh, wow, my hair really did look like that at some point. And I'll look at little things, but then I'll look and I'll be like, something will draw me like to the eyes or something, and I'll look and I'll be like, ooh, I still have that spark today that I had then, and so that's really cool. Or I'll be like, well, I don't see the world the same way, but I see it better. And so there's that hope and there's that foresight of going, wow, yeah, there's a lot of emotions in those eyes looking at the different ages, different levels. And to go and say, wow, the tribulations and the trials of life that we all experience, it really comes down to the biggest choice of the hero's journey is two big, huge choices. One is, are you going to let those trials and tribulations tear you down and bring you down? Or are you going to rise above and learn from And it's so easy to flip flop back and forth and get caught up in mind traps of, oh, yeah, this is going on, and, this isn't what I wanted, and now I'm stuck. And it takes you a while to go, wait a minute, I'm not stuck. I can leave this and go do this, and this is so much better. And sometimes the universe, like if it's a work situation, I love how the universe will work its magic of you're in a job that you're feeling like, a dread to go to. And then you'll get an email that says, hey, we're looking to hire at this company. And it's like, oh, that's what I really want to do. And they have a better deal over there. And so it's like the universe helping you push yourself to make the shit and change your course and do what you're really wanting to do. And so, yeah, when you're open and you see everything for what it is, you realize there is no wrong paths on the hero's journeys. And I think that's one of the major things that I hope people realize is, because we always say, oh, I took a wrong turn, or oh, I made a wrong choice. But in reality, as long as you're learning from it, there is no wrong choice. That's where I've come after 48 years now of being here to realizing that.
Yeah, I mean, the dark night of the soul can be pretty dark, right? But if you live consciously, you can die consciously. When you make mistakes consciously. Like, we're always going to make mistakes. We're always going to be learning. But if we do it consciously, then when we fall with more ease. And when we get back up, it's easier to get back up, because I always bring up that card in the tarot deck, the Tower, because that for me is like the snake skin. Like, we're supposed to shed skin, we're supposed to build towers, and the tower's supposed to fall. And especially when we're children, we commit to these ideas, like, when I grow up, I want to be a veterinarian. And then we feel conflicted about not following that dream. And all of these twists and turns of the road, we worry about, oh no, there went my chance, I blew it. Everything is like a once in a lifetime thing. Or we tend to think of the hero's journey as these big blowout events, which they can be, but in truth, it's day in, day out life, meeting people, going from point A to point B, manifesting, setting goals, and again, living consciously. And so I wrote a little note here that I was going to ask you if you feel like you're merged with the child self, because I feel like I'm merged with multiple child selves and multiple teenager and young adult versions of myself. So when it came to hosting the conference, that was actually age 4 Gina, age 7 Gina, and age 14 Gina, all collaborating together. And then me in this reality, the secretary, pulling it all together. And when I published the Dragon Dreams Oracle, it was like the dragon is out, it's released, it's out there. And thank God, age 4 Gina is in charge of that. Because the dragon's alive, it's sentient, it has its own mind, even though I created it. It just, it's amazing. And so, anyways, I know I throw a lot at my guests, but do you feel like there was a part of you that was merged with that little guy in the picture that you showed at the conference? And do you think that maybe he had a voice in that presentation? What are your thoughts?
It's interesting you bring that up because I was thinking about, we always talk about the inner child, and everybody's like, yes, that's our little selves, and that's it. And I was saying to somebody, wait, don't we have an inner teenager, an inner young adult, an inner adult? Why do we only have an inner child? What about the other ages? And so I feel like in creating the presentation, that was like my inner young adult, like going, yeah, let's share what we know. Let's put this all together. Let's show them the research. Let's show them the path of where all of this started from. And then when it came time for the experiences, my youngest inner child was like, yeah, let's share this story. We've never shared this story with anybody. And so I was like a little nervous about sharing it, but I was like, yeah, cat's out of the bag now. It's already spoken. So we'll just go with it and see, how this lands. And then my teenage self came out and was like, here's this experience that came, and it might have been later in life, but it still was in their perspective. And so each one of my voices of aspects were present and got to contribute something. So that was the beauty of it. And I actually am going to kind of flip the script as a surprise to you, Gina. And I have a question for you. You talked about the tower card and how it needs to be torn down. What if the tower doesn't need to be torn down and can be a bridge to another, or simply knocked down to build a new one, a better one?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I'm on your wavelength with that. But ultimately, for me, it comes down. So if it's in the process of alchemizing, like in the example that you gave, it's transforming into a bridge. Well, parts of the tower still need to break off and bye-bye because they don't fit the image of the bridge, working on a literal level of shapes here. So the tower is not the same shape as the bridge. So if I was the architect engineer and there I am with my hammers and tools, I still have a lot of garbage that I need to do away with. And I need to be mindful that I'm carrying the highest quality forward to create that bridge or whatever it is, because energy cannot be created nor destroyed, only transformed. And so when that tower crumbles, it's not actually being destroyed. It's an opportunity for us to reassemble it. But usually we're so clingy, me too, I admit it, that it's devastating when the tower falls. And usually it's like a mask. We cling to it so badly that if we don't get rid of it, we get irritable because it becomes too small for us to wear, and eventually it cracks off, and it's traumatic for us. But if you can transform, if you recognize the tower starting to crumble, and you take action of that alchemy and start transforming it into a bridge or whatever it is, to me that's no different than the caterpillar transforming into the butterfly. But in that process, the caterpillar sheds things away, right? The chrysalis is left behind when the caterpillar or the butterfly comes out of the pupa. That's my random answer to your random question. I don't know. Did that answer it okay?
Yes, perfectly. And and it's true. I mean, we can look at like tower bridges where they have towers with the bridge in there, and it's like, yeah, you can either add it to what you have as a foundation, or you can transmute it to a new shape and make a new. And so that's the beauty of it. And the reason I also brought that up is because, to me, that's symbolic of the ego. Is everybody views, to ascend or to go to the next level, you have to get rid of the ego. But what if you don't? What if you can transmute it, teach it, and learn how to exist on a new level? So we're always so quick to say we have to destroy this and get rid of this. And sometimes I wonder, is that going to an extreme, and that's why everybody is like, I'm not making any progress. It's still there. I can't get rid of it. Well, maybe because you're not supposed to. Maybe you just need to transmute it.
Yeah, you remind me of storms and cycles, the ebb and flow. Some things are faster, some things are slower, some things we need to learn something before we move on. I find that happens to me when I'm reading books. I set a goal, I'm going to read so many chapters, I fall behind, but then it's because I needed to watch a nature documentary and learn something about an animal, and then I was able to like make connections later, you know? So I thought about a lot of things when you were talking. I also thought about images of fire and smoke and a tower literally burning and on fire because even the smoke that's going up, it's still part of the greater transformation in and around. So um, um, it still counts as transformation. But the smoke part can be seen as the piece that's gone. You know what I mean? Like the prayer that's gone. Or what's interesting is you can think about the whole physical tower and fire being like left behind, and it's the smoke that rises and carries on. And so you can really work with these metaphors in so many directions. But you know, synchronicity has a way of presenting itself, right? It's always there. It's just a matter if we see it or not. And when you were talking, I was like, oh, yes, because on your on one of your slides, the one where you for the conference, you had three pictures. There was like the young adult you, and then in the middle, and then there was like an elementary school picture of you, and then the today you. And when you were talking, I got the impression that the young adult you was the bridge between the child and the present day you. Was like that one circle, bringing in the Venn diagrams from the past, connecting it, linking it to Venn diagrams of the future. And then the child wanted to tell a story, but the adult present day wasn't sure. And somehow there was common ground that was found with the young man version of you. And so it's like when you see the slide, now it's like, how did I not think all of this, right? So I think like this conversation was big time synchronicity. um I don't know, when you think back to that slide, what do you think? I wasn't planning on talking about this, but it's interesting.
No, it's you're absolutely right, and the way I look at it is, there's the young me that's has all this knowledge, has all this information, has all these experiences, but doesn't know how to express because doesn't know how to put it into words yet. All the things that I was born able to do, all the things that I've learned to do because I hadn't learned I couldn't do them yet. But then there's the young adult me who says, hey, we now have the vocabulary. We now have the descriptive words to share this idea and to share what we're seeing and putting it into perspective for people. And you could say, well, that's more the older adult, present day me, but present day me couldn't do that if it wasn't for the young adult learning and stepping up and doing it. So everything is built and bridged through key aspects of ourselves. And the ironic thing, too, is for my life as a young little lad, I would be, just going through motions of life and just, trying to absorb everything. I mean, I was reading McGruffy readers, if you're familiar with those. Those were the 1800s textbooks as a little kid. Shakespeare. I enjoyed reading King Arthur, Robin Hood. I was just absorbing information, but I didn't know what to do with it. And I didn't know why I was absorbing these specific, sources. And then the young adult me goes and says, oh, these were past lives. That's why I read about these. Or, oh, these correlate to, things that I want to do in my life. So now I have a foundation to understand and build on this. And, oh, now I understand this is, could be from astral or could be from different sources. Now I understand why I was gathering all of this when I was little and why I do what I do. So present day me sits there and says, okay, now that I understand where I came from, understand why I do what I do, things are still unfolding. So it's as, to tie it even back to the hero's journey is that's why they're never ending is because the adventures never end. And an interesting perspective to that too is, people believe when we transition from here, we just go to the dirt and that's it. We have a finite deal, but I would say even if that's true, being in that dirt and going through that process is a hero's journey's adventure. And so you can never truly escape these adventures. And so I actually had a friend message me earlier today that says, yeah, I'm going into a dark night, since you brought that up. And I said, oh, well, you should look forward to the wisdom you're going to get on the other side of it when you're done. And it was like, I think it kind of surprised them that I was like, oh, you're not going to sit there and go, oh, you're in the dark night. Oh, what can I do to help? Or what, what's brought you into the dark night? And I actually did though, because she just watched my presentation say, I hope I didn't trigger you. And she said, no, you didn't trigger me. So I was like, okay, good. But yeah, it's interesting how you can start to see your perspective and responses to things change as you progress through life.
And when it comes to healing and like alchemy, we always want to do these huge quantum leaps, right? Like we need to take little baby steps for most of the things, and we need to set a lot of goals and reach a lot of goals. We can't always, like every month, be making these big quantum leaps. And I find people struggle with the hero's journey because they're trying to do that. They're trying to do way too much. They're trying to skip over things. We tend to be extreme. Like we should think of the hero's journey as a nice cold beer, not like hardcore whiskey. You know what I mean? Even in my shamanic training, like there's what's known as soul retrieval, right? And different strategies and things that you can do. But there's also, you can create things like a despacho, which is like a physical offering. Maybe you get some seeds and nuts and, give it to the fire. But there's also what's known as a huaca. And people want that right away because they're like, what's the most hardcore? And it's like, that would be it, the huaca. But it won't work unless you've done all this other stuff first. And so it's almost like um, people people tend to escalate things, and they don't see the value in just downsizing the hero's journey. And even when it comes to meeting mentors and guides on the hero's journey, not every guide wizard that you meet is going to be this big blown out spirit guide. It's just there's a lot of little guides too. And in the Dragon Dreams Oracle, one of the cards talks about that. It's just a regular cat. And that's the power. It's that, archetypes and symbolisms come to us in forms that we're familiar with and often presented in everyday forms, like the cat, the chipmunk, the bird, the things that we don't find intimidating. Because for what it's worth, if a big giant elephant came out of, from behind the tree, that would just be too much, right? And plus, we don't have elephants naturally in North America. So the hero's journey needs to match and be in sync with the world around you, and then we've got our dream life to play. And I find when it comes to things like, people commenting that they get triggered and this dark night of the soul, like the dark night of the soul, it doesn't always have to be like this poisonous dark ritual, right? And just because somebody's experiencing some upset, that doesn't mean that, oh, now they're triggered in this and that. Like, I think people need to dial it back with the hero's journey. And if people are commenting that they're triggered because of your presentation, I see that as an invitation for them to explore the hero's journey. To me, they're not familiar with the hero's journey if they're getting triggered by it. A lot of people think the hero's journey is just dark night of the soul, shitty ass times, and it's not. The hero's journey is full of beautiful times, and the power of the hero's journey is recognizing when it's time to go, when it's time, how long do you linger in one place? When do you recognize your own stagnation? And of course, by the time the hero's journey is finished, nobody wants to return, which is so ironic because nobody wanted to go anyways. Now I'm just getting passionate about the hero's journey here, but clearly I have lots to say about it. And I find too, like when people are getting triggered, it's like they fall down the rabbit hole, because respectfully, like if you're at the grocery store and you smell somebody's perfume or the song on the radio triggers you, it might just kind of trigger a little memory, or it might trigger a whole entire can of worms that you weren't even aware of. So I feel like triggers can be a good thing, and it means that, like, your body is communicating to you that it wants to transform these traumas into treasures. It wants to lose ground to gain ground, and that's really scary, losing ground to gain ground and be certain of your uncertainty, and this business of shedding. And again, I'm just passionate here, but the small guy can make a difference. And even when you're in your 80s, um, the today you is going to be just the little guy from the past, right? Reminds me of Sue Gallagher's book, The Little Ones, because she's in her senior years, but she's still a little one in the eye of the universe, right? Doesn't matter how old you are. And anyways, any other thoughts before we talk about your fifth book?
I have a couple actually, and one is giving the presentation on the hero's journey. As we got closer, I started getting triggered and going, "Oh my god, I actually have to talk. I actually have to do this, and how how's this gonna go? And am I really gonna have something to say?" And it's like all my nerves just started getting up, and I started doubting. And I'd be talking to you and to Julia and going, I'm really hopeful that, I'm going to be able to switch this off when I start. And like I do my podcast shows, I'm hoping that that'll trigger and will activate, because if not, oh boy, here we go. And you guys were like, both of you were constantly saying, "Oh, you got this, don't worry," and everybody else on the side was like, "Hey, good luck with your presentation, you're going to do great." And I was getting all these kind of positive to start with, but it's, people don't realize that, as much as we talk about only you can do the hero's journey, it doesn't mean you can't get help along the way. And, you know, that's, it was kind of really synchronistic, and that we're talking about it now, that was just on Saturday, and was able to experience it and be like, yeah, I could have talked about this, at the presentation too, if I, had more time to. And the Q&A, I even felt really cool that, I was able to answer the questions, and to, everybody was like, "Hey, I really like the way you answered the questions." And I was like, that, made me feel even better, because that was unscripted. So that was not planned. That was just mind flowing. And so I was like, oh boy, my mind, when it goes, which Gina's familiar with too. And so, yeah, I mean, we get passionate and the time goes by. And I just am so grateful that, these heroes' journeys, one of the, talking about the images, is I showed the images where you could barely see the people because they're doing the shadow work. and they're into the shadows is how we view ourselves. And then it's like as you progress, there's more and more light on you. Maybe not your surroundings, but on you. But that's all you need. And in the end, I had the young kids celebrating, the young adults celebrating, the elderly celebrating. They did it. And to me, the one thing that I think people don't realize is the very first hero's journey that you do is the hardest. But then I feel like there's something that should be clicking in your mind that says, "Hey, we did it. We accomplished this. We can do this." And so when another one comes up, it won't be as traumatic or it won't be as hard. And that would be my hope, is that you realize, all these heroes' journeys, whether they're small or large, once you accomplish it, you have the mindset, I did it once, I can do it again, and be able to go through them. And I don't know that I necessarily think about the journeys being overwhelming because people are taking too big of steps. I think what it is they have in their mind this is how it's going to go, and when it doesn't go that way, then they start to go, "Oh, I did it too much," or "Oh, I bit off more than I could chew. What was I thinking?" And they go into panic and doubt mode. And then they go, "Wait a minute, no, I can do this," and come out on the other end accomplishing it. Or even if they don't accomplish it, that's still the win. And that's one of the things that why I put that in there as well is, even the failures that we view them as are not failures. There actually are successes because of the way you look at it. And so, yeah, and I could keep going, but yeah, we got to get to the book, or we've been having a
No,
part
the
two to
hero's
this.
journey is easy to keep going on, right? And even when I was a teacher, we would talk about strengths and weaknesses, and we were transforming that into strengths and areas of focus, because we shouldn't see everything as a weakness. And some of us are better at things than others. So it might not even be an area of focus, right? And I was surprised too that you were nervous. But you know what? Respectfully, it's one thing to talk like, you're just talking now, enjoying yourself, but it's another when you're making a presentation and it's based on your actual real experience. And then, of course, there's the other elements there, like, you had a time frame that you could not go over. And behind the scenes, those who are tuning in, Michael was asking me, like, he was double checking, are you sure 35 minutes? Because his presentation was like 34 minutes and a half or something like that. Like, whatever. I really didn't care if it went over a minute or two. I just didn't want it to go over like 10, 15 minutes, because then we wouldn't have time for the Q&A, right? And Michael was worried because he wanted to tell stories. And I had to tell Michael in a nice way. I said, you know what, if you go over the 35-minute mark, I'm going to have to pop on the screen and kind of give you that nonverbal wrap it up. And it's still all worked out, right? And so I feel like um, it pays to be prepared, even to be over prepared, having backup stories, because you know what, right there on the spot, you might change your mind. Like the example you gave in the video that you submitted in advance, you were wondering, is it okay if you give a different example when you're live? And it's like, that's totally fine, right? So so that's worth noting. And I don't know if Michael mentioned it at the conference, but that was Michael's first time creating a PowerPoint presentation. And so there's all these other elements mixed in there that you really got to give yourself that credit. It wasn't just talking, it was talking, presenting, you were live. That has stress on it too. And just even switching roles, because you're used to being in the role of the host, like Brian Rue, and you two were in the position of guest on Saturday, which kind of feels like it was just yesterday, right? I'm still taking it all in. But any final thoughts before we actually talk about your fifth book?
Well, one is, since you brought up, the slideshow, the presentation being the first time, is I remember when I submitted it to you and we were like doing the tech run going, oh, the video doesn't have the transitions that I put in. And I was like, well, I guess that's okay if, doesn't need that. And I didn't realize I had forgotten I had set a timer on the slides, and so they started jumping, and so I had to jump back real quick because I was like, wait, I'm still on this topic, hold on, back up. But it started transitioning too, and I was like, oh, I'm so glad I had those in there for the occasional when it just was like, okay, yeah, this is a good time. And I somehow managed to time it just right to that. And so, yeah, and I had the alarm and set to do the time because I I also have in me ingrained that when it's 35 minutes, I have to be respectful to the other people because I feel like it's unfair of me if everybody's is 35 minutes and I go 36 minutes or 35 and a half, because then I feel like I'm taking extra time where everybody else, went really hard to be on time. So that's why that's ingrained in me. And it was my first time speaking too, actually, as a presenter. And so there was the nerves of that too. And so I was really glad that it all came together and all worked out. And there was a great team behind the scenes that I think helped everybody feel comfortable. And thank you to Jason too for jumping in and helping out too. So, okay, I think we spent enough time on the conference.
Jason's with us today too. Hi, Jason in Anchor Haven. Happy St. Patty's Day to those who celebrated. Michael and I are here today to celebrate his fifth book. So we're just recapping the conference on Saturday, Promise of Spring 2026, the first ever. If you didn't have a chance, make sure you visit it on my YouTube and you can find Michael's presentation. I made it a point to have all the presenters' presentations available. So it was really, really nice. And Anchor Haven's commenting that it was very well done. She's giving you a thumbs up there. So this book here that you've written, let me just pull up the cover. I love this picture because it's so inquisitive looking, like and just like this porthole. And I just thought, why don't you just talk about the cover before we actually start talking about the content? Tell us about the cover.
It's interesting you point out the picture. I actually took, while I was doing the cover work, I originally had intended I was going to hand draw it, but then I was like, I don't know that I have the artistic skill to really make people realize this is me. And I'm still a novice at drawing people. And so I was like, okay, why don't I sit there? And I literally took my cell phone out like this in front of me and was like doing these different poses. And then I was like, I put them on the image that I had created in the back for the background, and was like, which one works best? Which one of the poses, lines up? And when I put this one on, and the reason I went with it is not only are my eyes looking up into the portal of what the topics, are going to be in the book, kind of little Easter eggs there, but if you look at the lightning that's going through the UFO, it actually connects to both hemispheres of my head. And I was like, oh, I was so, little things like that. I was so excited, the little nuances that peeked in. And I also like, because you were talking about like the presentation was, I come off like being a storm going through the ebb and flow. And that's very true, as I view my life as being, like I get energized by the storms, and I can either bring the storm or I can ride through a storm that's been brought to me. But I also was like, what are, you know, how can I show people what they're going to be in for? And so the UFO, that's just my little nod to the unexplained and going, yeah, be prepared. These are going to be topics that are probably you might consider conspiracy theory or something. But then the moon, I specifically got a dark side and the light side combined because I talk about the moon in the book. There's a section where I show a lot of research into the moon and what is the moon, and what do we really know about it. And so I was like, that I felt was a strong topic that needed to be illustrated. And on the top is somebody with their energy. And so, I talk about energy, being in the moment, or being, you know, watching your thoughts versus your perceptions, different deals. And so I was like, yeah, I'm so glad I was able to work that image into it. And the tree, I was trying to find a tree that had like little lights on it or candles on it. And I couldn't find any, but I found this one that kind of like the little aspects of it glowed. And that is my nod to like ancestry and genealogy, is the family tree there. And on the right is a UFO, and it's because I talk about like, travel and astral traveling and everything. And to me, the image that most people will relate to that is the UFO. And I thought it was cool that it was in a portal within itself. And the whole ring was like the vision of I'm bringing these thoughts from somewhere out there to here, to be looked at and viewed. And anybody that knows me knows I use television or movies as a nod. And so I was so fortunate that I had AI generate the TARDIS of Doctor Who, and it looks like so close to it, but it was AI, so I was able to skate by and not get into copyrights over the images. And it's my nod to the fact that that I talk about time travel and what is time travel a little bit in the book, and a viewpoint of it. And so all of my covers, as you get familiar with my books, they all have what I call little Easter eggs designed into them to let you know this is what you're in for in this book. This is what this book is mainly about. And here's a really cool way that I think my hope was people would be like, hey, this cover looks really cool, and pick it up. So at least it got picked up if it was in a bookstore. And I'd be like, hey, somebody picked up my book. Cool. And didn't just walk by those blank cover books that says the title and that's it. It's like, yeah, okay. So yeah, that's where I come from with the um covers. And a reason I have a forest on there is because, to me, I think about, as I'm in thought, there's wisdom in the trees too, and there's wisdom all around us. And so it was like a way of showing everything is coming together. So I'll turn it back over to you, Gina.
Wow, that was a lot of insight. Because yeah, I was wondering, like, no Selena Ingles this time. I guess you just wanted to do it all on your own. And the lightning caught my attention because it was going through the UFO, but I didn't realize, yeah, it is touching both sides of your head, almost like kind of like a surgery, like you get hooked up to the left and you're getting hooked up to the right. And in shamanic training, I don't know the story, but way back in the day, shamans, as part of like an initiation, there would be a lightning storm, and if the lightning basically touched them or almost touched them, it was like some kind of a communication that they were the real deal. And thankfully, that initiation doesn't exist anymore. And if I had a better memory recall, I would tell you more about it. If anybody out there knows what I'm talking about, please inform us. But I thought about that too, because the lightning is like igniting this process. And for me, in my dream world, it's the pink lightning, and you've got like the iridescence, glowy, whitey lightning. And so I think that's cool. And the lightning, like it comes from the sky, then it goes, like it's almost like it transforms, like the lightning in itself alchemizes, then it goes to you. And I think that's really interesting. And I wrote medicine wheel because medicine wheel popped in my mind, because you could really play with the image of the porthole and then the images and the directions and just where your thoughts are floating. And I was also looking, like, what's in the middle there? Is that like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, the telephone booth that they're traveling in? Because it made me think about time travel. And also, I wrote a note because the top Buddha guy with the legs crossed. Again, if I had a better memory, I would tell you more. See, in my dream life, I get lots of snippets of information, but somewhere along my way, um, so folks who are like ascended masters and that kind of stuff, you might see them, right, in like a ghost spirit form. But if you see them presented as a rainbow, that means that they've like really crossed over and they're like far ahead on their spiritual journey. But there was a point to be made if they were cross-legged, specifically cross-legged in rainbow form. And so I just thought it was interesting that it was cross-legged and in the north. Like if it was a medicine wheel, the high qualities would be in the north with hummingbird. And the north, when you go through the medicine wheel, is freaking hell. Like I remember when I did my shamanic training, I was like, oh, good. Now we're finally in the north, now that we're done with snake and jaguar. And the north was like the toughest. And so I feel like maybe this um, character that you have there, it's on like the black bluey side, but maybe it's going to transform into like a rainbow. And just like it's easy to get lost in timelessness here, right? And Anchor Haven is commenting, that's the TARDIS. So there you go.
Well, and a couple things real quick is Selena and I, she was originally doing the cover, but she's got a new job, and being a single mom, she's got a lot of, she was like, I have too much with learning this new job, and would it be okay if you did the cover on your own? I believe in you, you can do it. So I actually did this with her full support, and she loved the idea. I was talking to her about it, and I said, hey, do you think I should use a picture instead of drawing me? And she said, absolutely. I think people would love to see you on the cover as you. And so, yeah, so she did play a role. She didn't actually do any hands on, but she still was a part of it. And so I just wanted to acknowledge on that aspect, yes, she, was a part of it, but not in it. But, and also, you talk about, the lightning and everything, how that starts the journey is I have the ability since I was a teenager. If I'm not very careful when I touch light switches, I will get electric sparks. And I've had electricity actually flow through my body during an experiment in college that nearly got me kicked out of the college, but I finished, and didn't have to go to the hospital. And so I have a kinship to lightning, and so I just realized, yeah, that's probably why I liked it lined up that way. And there's lightning coming from the portal too. So okay, that's enough on the cover.
So, what do you really want to tell us about your book number 5?
This book is the reason I call it Deeper Insights into the Mind of Michael is because let's say I'm thinking about genealogy or past lives. I take you on a journey that shows, okay, so this is my start point. I have this question. Then I go and I gather this research information. And so I include what some of the research information that pertains to the topic. And then I start formulating, theories and ideas. And then I pose a question to myself at the end, what does all this mean? And so that's what I wanted to showcase in this book is this is how I think. And the interesting thing is, as you look in the book, it could be like several pages of a thought process. And so you're thinking, oh, wow, he really takes his time and is really, thinking about this and everything. But the way my brain works is I can run like I used to joke with my parents when I was a kid, going, I can run billions of thoughts in a second and be able to track every single one of them. And so my mind is constantly going through ideas and everything. And the one thing, too, I will say, that draws me to the TARDIS and Doctor Who is it is a phone, it's a police phone booth box, and it looks small on the outside and looks so like mundane, like you could walk by it and not care, not be caught in the mystique of it. But when you open it up, it is like huge, and it actually stands for time and relative dimension in space. And so it really makes you look at the world in a new way because you realize, some of the smallest things had the grandest scale. And as a little nod to Doctor Who, is I put in the book a little thing that said, this changes per doctor, whoever's the persona is. But the last known count was there was like almost, I think, 1,100 rooms in this little phone booth. And so it really and it could be pools or gardens, and it really makes you sit there and go, well, my life, is I'm confined to this body, but look at the infinite information contained in it, infinite energy that flows through it. I, that's created. So what about putting it outside of myself and going, instead of looking at myself being a small speck of dust to, other beings out there, I'm huge because I am me, and this is as big as I want to make it. And so, yeah, there's a whole bunch of just different ways of getting caught up in how I look and think about things. And I always tell people as a joke of, be careful trying to think like me because I don't go in my mind either, because you can easily get lost in there. So this was my little nod, like kind of to that aspect too, as all the different topics that kind of, it's like I go one topic to another topic. I'm like, this is how my mind works. This book, it's like I literally put my brain on paper.
Thank you for sharing all of that. Yeah, you have like a very narrowed focus when you talk about time travel. Boom, there it is on the page. Now you're going to talk about the moon. Boom, there it is. Me, I'm not like that. I'm like, I have to tell this story. Now I have to tell this story. Now I have to tell these other stories. Now I have to tell a story how they come together. It's interesting as you write and as you share out, you really discover your own writer's voice. And I wrote down the moon and time travel because I want you to speak more about that at some point, just so I remember. But I wrote down blink, implode, explode, because I like playing around with that. Lefty loosey, righty tighty, tap tap tap. That's like when I stir my coffee, I'm like lefty loosey, righty tighty, tap tap tap, and I do that all the time. I light incense, and I haven't thought about it in a while why I do that, and I do for reasons that you're talking about, but you didn't explicitly say it. Hi, James. I see that you're tuning in live there. James Whittick is with us. So, imploding and exploding reminds me like imploding is going in. So I would see that as like, going in, like a deep introspection, right? But then this business of exploding, it's like, sorry, imploding is going in. So you righty tighty things up, right? You concentrate it more. Exploding, lefty loosey, you let it go. But then there's this blink. And for me, um, there's like the blink imploding, exploding, but that's not what I'm talking about. There's a special blink that doesn't implode or explode. It just flashes like it's there, not there. And to me, there's something special about transformation that goes on within that blinking. And when you were talking about inside the mind, outside of the mind, it's almost like you were able to flip that so that you could transform into that blinking, so you could have that sacred space, if you will, to investigate your alchemy and make decisions, um, consciously, living consciously, and not just imploding, exploding, righty tighty, loosening up. Like there was a mindfulness. um, does any of that mean anything to you? Because in my mind, it made a lot of sense when you were talking. And to me, like imploding, exploding, and blinking in the dream life, like it's just it's really special and something imagery that I work with. What are your thoughts on that? Maybe you don't have any, and that's okay. But do you have any?
Actually, so here's another way that my mind works is as you were describing imploding and exploding, my mind goes, well, you can't explode until you implode because the implosion, you're drawing everything in. And then there's a moment where it says, I have everything I need. I got to let this out. And it turns into explosion and then bursts out. And so that's a way that they're bridged and connected. And when you look at explosions, we just see the burst of energy going out. But what we don't see is there's that little spark that goes, like for demolitions, as an example, that a little electric spark that gets sent, hits the trigger. The trigger goes, hey, we have energy now. We need to release. So it imploded that spark in and then exploded out. So there really is always going to be an implosion and an explosion. So the way you can look at it is you're drawing all the energy and everything you need in, and that's how we heal ourselves, and how we grow is our energy and everything is coming in and we're awakening everything within us. But then what happens with it once we have it is the energy that's created from there is sent out. And we call it resonance or frequencies or energy itself. And what how the universe makes it works is, so let's say Gina's like, hey, I'm looking for somebody that has the energy or frequency of hero's journey. And I'm over somewhere else and I'm going, hey, I have all this knowledge about this journey and I just got to let it out and I'm letting it out. Well, she's going to pick up the resonance of, hey, Michael over here is talking about this journey. I like how he's describing it. I like how he's sharing it out. I want to, see about bringing him here. And then it becomes you're drawing me in by talking to me. And then I'm given an outlet to share out. And so it becomes this constant cycle. And that's the resonance and how it works is we draw in to let out.
Yes, I'm sitting here going, yes, 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 yes. And just as James was typing contraction and expansion cycles, I was thinking ebb and flow, and then he typed that. So that was good synchronicity for us, James. But yeah, this like breathing that we do, right? And also going back to the lightning image, there's like a twinkling that goes on, and that's why lightning is so scary, and because it's unpredictable. But if you can channel it, like it's like in your cover, it was being channeled and directed and narrowed down. Going back to that narrowed down language, I wrote down black hole when you were talking. I love thinking and I love thinking about thinking. So thank you for all of these inspiring thinking thoughts. But like that's what black holes do. Black holes are light eaters. So they're like gobble, 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 yum, 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 tasty light. They eat it all. And when they get full, they burp, if you will. And when they burp, they flip inside out. And some people believe that's a theory how creation is made. So the black hole is basically like the womb and tomb, if you will. Like it, it, it's the original mother, and then the big bang is that when it throws up because it can't eat any more light, and then it dies, if you will, but then it gives birth to the new mother. And this is something that poets and seers talk about, but scientists, I don't know. Uh, I don't know where I picked that up from. If anybody out there knows what I'm talking about.
It's
And you
your
know what? I
power.
feel a lot more comfortable these days being like, if anybody knows what I'm talking about, let me know. Because I don't know what I'm talking about. But
It's your
I
power.
thought creation of your book, right? And creation of your hero's journey. I don't know. What are your thoughts? I'm going to mute myself.
So I think where you're drawing this from is I keep going back to your tower and your deck because you mentioned like fire burning it down and the smoke, that's going off of it at the same time. And I look at it as smoke in the indigenous tribes is you're giving voice to what was there to the universe. So whatever knowledge was contained in that tower, the smoke is giving it to the universe to hear and process and learn from and understand. And at the same time, the fire, as it turns to the ash, well, what happens to the ground after fires? Everybody thinks, oh no, the earth has been scorched, the earth has been destroyed. No, it puts nutrients in the ground for new growth. It's actually is, cleansing in a lot of cultures. They view fire as cleansing. And so when you get stuck in your, hero's journey on your dark night of the soul, there's a process that I was taught where you write down what you're stuck about, all your thoughts, all your feelings, and then you go to a fire pit or someplace safe and you burn it and you release all of that into the air through the smoke, and what's left of the ash gets blown away. But what's left for you is a clean slate where you're like no longer held captive by that aspect. And so you are now free of it to either bring it back by starting to think about it again and starting to own it again, or making the choice to go, I'm so glad that's gone. Now I can do this. And so there's, a tie into that. And I don't know if you were thinking about that when you designed that card and had your intentions to that card, but I just wanted to share that real quick with you.
I think about all kinds of things. It's hard to keep track of it all, actually. Um, I was thinking about the whales because they're known to harmonize. Like in real waking life, whales harmonize each other's songs that they sing. They all sing the same song and then they teach it to each other. They kind of agree on it and then they swim away, transform it into their own, making it their own. I thought about that. And then also, coal eventually transforms into diamond, and you can't, of course, have coal unless you burn wood or burn something, right? And so there's these gifts that come with us. And James has a really great question in the chat that you could probably take. But just before I get to James's question, I had a little laugh because earlier you commented being inside the mine, and it's like a house of mirrors. And I had a laugh because it's like inside my mind, it's like a clown house, And whenever psychics want to like work on me and do energy medicine, they always ask me, like they kind of sound like a vampire. They're like, Gina, you need to let me in. And I'm like, what, huh? Like, because I don't mean to be so blocked off. And I'm like, I let you in? I don't know. And then they're like, okay, thanks. But I just thought, like, who wants to go inside my mind, right? It's just like hilarious. Um, and let me put James's question on the screen here. It's a big one. How about cycling back and forth from time? Let me restart that. How about cycling back and forth from space time to time space, like alternating current above and below the elliptic? We are flashing on and off so many times a second through those cycles. It makes me think about the blink, and then he's got a part two here. Taoism shows that we are flashing on and off so many times a second. We're here and someplace else, going from space time to time space. James, I need to have you as a guest at some point. What are your thoughts on this, Michael?
So there is a difference between space time and time space, if I'm thinking of
Mhm.
it the way that James is. And so space time is, if I wanted to go from Earth to the moon, it
Right.
takes by shuttle, I think they say like a month or two to get there. Or, it takes time to get there, in other words.
Right.
But that's because we are operating in the 3D.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
time space is operating off of 3D. It could be 4D, 5D, 2D, 1D. And so, therefore, I can go from here to the moon in a split second, and there's no difference in the traveling. It's our perception of the time and the way that we are looking at it and realizing, we look at, say, like UFOs and we go, wow, they've traveled so far to get here. But in reality, they could have traveled through wormhole. They could have, traveled through hyperspace or
Yes.
warp speed, as the terms that we call it, light speed. Or they could have already been here, but went up to a colony and are returning.
Yes.
And so they're not actually, taking a long trip. They're already here, but
Yeah.
because we don't see them, we don't understand them. Our minds filter them out. And a great example of this is I went back and I watched The Last Unicorn, the movie,
Okay.
and there's a scene where in the very beginning, this unicorn says to the man, "How dare you call me a mare? How dare you call me a horse? I'm not a horse." And
Mhm.
she looks at herself and sees her shadow and says, "Oh, I forgot. Man has forgotten about us, so they only see us as a horse. They don't see me as the unicorn because they don't believe in unicorn anymore." And
Mm,
so,
mm.
as we're putting our squirrel came by or something, but as we're looking at, connecting ourselves with the universe around us, we are starting to activate beacons and we are putting out signals to the world and to the universe saying, here we are, we're waking up, we're understanding you're out there and that you're a part of us. And so I could sit there and say, by space time, it would take probably 3 or 4 lifetimes to get to Andromeda from here. But in time space, the thought travels so fast, they'll hear it and be here before I even really get the sentence out, my thought out. And
Hmm.
so, yeah. And
Yeah.
so, hourglass, yeah, there's the flow of, depending on the size of the hourglass, depends on how fast
Yes.
the sand falls. However, there is something about that people don't realize.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it can be the size of a tree to a blade of grass, but that point in the center where the two intersect, how
Yes.
thick that is will determine how fast the sand falls. It doesn't matter how big the top and bottom is, it's that little tiny center point. And to me, that center point is like our 0 point of who we are. It's us in the center of the toroidal fields that we are and that we're generating and putting the energy out. And so if we have a
Yes.
small hole, we're only letting out a small portion of us. But
Yes.
if
Yes.
we have a larger hole, we're putting more energy out. And so more energy is coming to us. There's a ebb and flow, as you like to say, to it of
Yes.
as much as you're putting out is what you're going to get in. So
Yes.
if you limit what you're going to be bringing in, you're going to limit what you're letting out.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And I'm just going to read what James wrote so people who are tuning in know what you're talking about here. James Whittakis is commenting, I think of an hourglass, you have inflow and outflow, but at the center point or 0 point, there is no flow. It would be considered at infinite velocity or everywhere all at once. And then there's a part two, or you are everything and have unlimited potential. In my dream journal, like, we are everything and no thing simultaneously. That always comes up. Everything, no thing. And I wrote hourglass too while you were talking because um, for me, it's not so much an hourglass shape, but whatever. It's the number 8, the infinity sign, and that can twist and turn to create like one circle. It can twist to create the two circles. One circle may or may not be bigger or smaller depending on what's going on. The two circles, I think, could even separate, kind of like a mitosis. I don't even know. And then you have two circles, and then it creates like a cylinder. and the rectangle shape, it's like an illusion holding it together. I find this very fascinating. I mean, once you start getting me talking, it's hard to stop. But the reason this is important is because the moon, you have the full moon and the dark moon on your cover. You have like half and half, but it made me think those are the two circles in the infinity sign. So we have more synchronicity, whether you intended that or not. I find it fascinating.
And as you're talking about the infinity sign, I always found it interesting. The infinity sign is the number 8, and the number 8 is balance and abundance and success, and it's the powerhouse, the karmic equalizer in numerology. And I also look at the Celtic knot, and I view it as a Celtic knot, which anyone who's familiar with that symbol, they're very hard to draw precisely because it has no beginning, no end. They are symbolic of the universe, and eternity is, and time itself is, there's no beginning, there is no end. Everything is in constant motion all at the same time. And so, yeah, I just wanted to point out that as you mentioned the infinity, you were saying the different options, and I was like, yeah, look at the number 8. It's the infinity sign.
Absolutely. And oops, what did I do here? Serious Dreams is here. Welcome. I remember you were at the conference with us, so it's nice to have you here too. And James was also with us all day on Saturday. Yeah, I do want to read from your book, but I wanted to share something kind of funny, kind of interesting, kind of cool. So, Eric, Council of Nine, a handful of years ago now, we would talk every day for like 4 or 6 hours for 4 or 6 days in a row, and this went on for like a year. And he really helped me with my dream symbolism and just kind of stepping into it, owning it. And one time he gave me directions, and I thought, okay, I'm ready for this, you know? And the directions was something like 20 green, 5 red, 2 blue, black, black, orange, orange, pink, pink, purple, 20, um, whatever it was. And it made me think like of spirals and colors and time travel, and kind of like somebody hopping, like waiting for the next train to come, like waiting for that next color to hop and somehow making their way across the universe. And I felt compelled to tell you that because I was wondering, maybe this had something to do with time travel, because I did write time travel eventually to ask you about. um, does time travel have any color significance to you, I guess is what I'm asking.
I don't know about color to me, but the reason I look at time travel is um so when I was talking about it in the book is, I say, look at the devices that we use. There's the time machine, H.G. Wells, it's a chair you sit on. Doctor Who, it's a police box that you fly around in that's small, but it's tremendously larger on the inside, and they make the comic comment of it's bigger on the inside. And everyone's like, yep. And so it becomes like a joke as the series goes on. But we don't sit there and look at and go, well, if I'm sitting here and I go, well, let me think about the moon, for example, and I can go, oh, I wonder what it was like to see them stepping foot on the moon for the first time, if they did. I'll leave that up to the viewer to interpret that. But if I sit there and I'm like, and I feel like this vastness around me all of a suddenly, and I smell like this dusty air, like that's different from where I was, and I start to see myself as being like in this dark where I can see the moon dust and the lunar lander there, and I can feel like, okay, in other words, all my senses are engaged to being on the moon. I've been told by a doctor of the mind that that is time travel. You have traveled to that moment and you are there in that moment. And so I could be physically standing on the moon watching this event and nobody would ever see me because they don't believe it's possible to be standing on the moon without a spacesuit on. So their mind would filter me out, or even if they did, they would never tell NASA, hey, we got a human being standing on the moon wearing jeans and a t shirt and looking at us right now. Because NASA would be like, yep, you're not going into space anymore because apparently it's making you hallucinate. And they would be mocked out of NASA. And so, it's just a matter of, do we want to go into time travel? What happens if we go into time travel? And what is the true catch all to it? And I was talking with Augie Nost one night on the show, and because he loves time travel too, and he was surprised that I said I would not go back in time to change an event because, let's say, hypothetically, we'll use the conference as an example, and you interrupted my presentation because you thought there was a glitch and there wasn't. And I was like, man, that presentation would have been so much better if she didn't go and do that. And I go back in time and I go, I say, hey, Gina, I got this. There's going to be no glitches. I promise. Just let it flow. And it flows. Well, I have hence affected your timeline because you may have needed that moment of interjecting to create a moment to where a lot of people viewing it were like, oh, since he got distracted, this new tangent that came out was really cool and I really relate to, but because you never interjected, then tangent never happened. And so we have to realize, when we go back, we think, I'll just fix myself. I'll just fix what I did. But it not only impacts me, it impacts you and everybody who was watching. And so that's where I was like, yeah, going back in time is not as simple going and altering one event. There are multitude of events being birthed out of that moment.
Yes, that is a fascinating conversation. I mean, like, um, in hypnotherapy, people ask that a lot because you merge with the child, for example. So it's like, well, if I'm merging with age 4 Gina, then what happens to the rest of age 4 Gina's life? And some people believe that the universe like creates a whole new timeline, so the new Gina merged with age 4 Gina continue on, and in that other timeline, I mean, nobody knows for certain, but it would continue, um, and you can make changes, and I feel like making changes to timelines always have to do with you, the individual, right? So even if like, um, I wanted to, I don't know, change something. Like something that wasn't me. Like maybe there was a rock band that came in the area, but they didn't come to like my city, and then I wanted to like go and change it. Like it always needs to. It's like healing. If you're going to mess around with the Akashic records, it has to do with you, and it has to do with pulling wisdom, right? Because past is gone. It's not even there. It's just a matter of changing the programming. And the future is not even there either. It's all here in the now. And that's why, like, when you talk about time travel and being two places at once, I feel like that's why it's possible, because the ocean, if you will, is flat, and that's the subconscious mind. And then it's the conscious mind that creates these waves to kind of like understand this year and that year. Very, very interesting.
You
Um,
know, there's another thing to
oh, go
note
ahead.
too, as you talk about, age 4 Gina, for example, merging with you today. You're not taking age 4 Gina out of that timeline and putting her in this timeline. That is impossible because that has happened. You can't take yourself out of time into the present. But what you can do is take the information, or as we call it in metaphysics, the lessons that you learned, you can bring that into the present. And so you're bringing awareness and new thought into the present from age 4. So we're not erasing timelines, we're not making events disappear. We're just changing the way we looked at them and the way we seen them and what we learned from them. And so I felt like that was something that needed, in my opinion, in my experience, to be clarified that way so that people don't go, oh, Gina just killed age 4 Gina because that timeline no longer existed. How is she here today? No, we're not physically removing something, and we're not physically changing anything. Not yet. And so that becomes a whole nother can of worms, so to speak.
Right. Well, it's absolutely fascinating for sure. Um, Serious Dreams making a comment. Interesting with the color numbers. Colors could be a direction, different ways to see it. I think of a heptagram slash fairy star I recently came across. Interesting. I know I could keep asking you questions all day. Let me read this one comment here, Michael, and then let's get to the reading of your book. James is commenting, in my night travels last night, I was being shown an aspect of Kruger, and I remember saying, no, not Kruger, and waking up. Kruger like Freddy Krueger? Is that what you mean? Or
No,
is Kruger like a scientist?
Kruger is an element of MK Ultra and the secret space
Well,
program,
that's how
and
much
it's a
I don't know.
dark faction. And so yeah, it's a one of the darker factions that people are taken to be a part of, and part of deals that were done. And so yeah, that's part of the secret space program. You got to unmute, Gina.
Michael sent me some stuff to read, but I'm wondering, do I read first or do you read first, Michael?
um yeah, that's a good question. I didn't think about that.
And I have more questions. I just thought maybe you'll answer the questions as we read and it might change my questions.
um I'll read mine first, and then we'll let you
Okay.
read.
I will mute myself and I will remove myself from the screen. Okay, Michael Kopf reading from his fifth book, Deeper Insights into the Mind.
So this comes from chapter 6, Living in the Moment. One aspect of living in the moment I found to be the hardest for me to remember and hold on to is the fact that the past, present, and future all exist in a singular moment. When we say living in the moment, I view it as a point in time where the past, present, and future all intersect. This makes this a magical point in time in my perspective. Imagine all three timelines, if you view the past, present, and future as such, intersecting at one point what a convergence that would be. That would mean your past self is occupying the same space as your future self. Your present self is able to witness and merge with your other two selves. That is the true wisdom and power of a moment in time, or living in the moment. Living your life knowing the past is happening as we speak, the future is now, has some mind blowing truth to it that will impact greatly how you would impact how your world and environment proceeds. Sorry, it's a little dark. I thought I had enough afternoon light. Imagine what life would be like if we could see our past self and future self in every moment existing in yourself at one time. Wow. Living in the moment seems to be a hard thing to master. If you look at the Star Trek universe, they mention this in the movie Star Trek Insurrection. And I will stop there because that is a quote from the movie, and I will let you read it and see what you think. You got on mute, Gina.
I'm sorry about that. Sirius was typing in, my dreams turn off and on. At least the memory recall last night felt like it turned on, or recall dial turned up. That's interesting too. Like if we're remembering our dreams, or dreams half remembered, half misunderstood. Okay, it's my turn to read. I've got it here in theory. Okay, this is from Michael's book, everybody. We live in a world that is governed by our thoughts and perceptions. Yet, these two concepts are not always in alignment, in my opinion. I will start by clarifying how I see each of these concepts. Thought is the energy given to a concept or idea in your mind that you have given voice to. This voice is either in your head or only heard by you or is spoken by you for others to hear. This energy starts as a concept or belief within that is being shared. Perception, on the other hand, is something different. Perception is something that is either in your head or spoken out loud through the filters of your mind, and therefore a judgment created by your experiences. Perceptions are created by expressing wisdom gained through life experiences. They are judgments because not everyone is the same. So, not every outcome is the same. Let me give you some examples. And I don't have any examples. This is where the quote ends.
Oh, I don't want to give away everything.
Oh, wow. Wow, like it just made me think more and more, right? And um I think those are good points. Like I want to put it back up here now. Um I guess it's like your perspective and the way you're living things and the discernment that comes with it, and honoring your own experiences, because we're saturated with subconscious programming that we just if we hear or see something, we put it in a category and we don't fall back on our own perspectives. And when we reflect on our own work, and when we even say things out loud, we hear the sound of our voice and it adds that coherence. And so now my brain is playing around with that quote that I just read. Yeah, it was really great.
A way that I was looking at it is, if I was to say a computer is a device that allows me to store information and to view information. that is a thought. That's what, I think of a computer. But now this is the perception is a laptop is a place where you can store information as long as the hard drive is working, and you better back it up and have it stored in multiple places. And it does allow me to view information as long as the Wi-Fi is hooked up and everything. That becomes more perspective because I'm talking about it in a way of these are the things that work and don't work in my experiences. So therefore it's not a thought, it's my perception is of the device. And so that's where I was going with the definition and trying to clarify is there's filters put into it.
Yes, and I think filters even like our own thoughts, feelings, opinions, and the epigenetics around us and the vibrations that our body and mind are getting, and then we interpret it, internalize it. And the word concept, it's not a word I use often. And I notice when people talk about my work, they refer to it as a concept. And I'm like, okay, because I guess the perspective is mine. And to people who don't have that perspective, it remains a concept, a thought to them. So, did you have a thought or did the thought have you? That's what I always ask because, on The Adventures of Mark Twain, I don't remember who wrote the movie, but there's a part where they're having a conversation with Satan, and the way their little interaction ends is he basically tells them, like, you're nothing but a thought. And when I was a kid, I remember, like, it was like Satan was like an authority, and I thought, okay, like I should listen to what he has to say. And it was like he was telling the truth, and that's what made him the devil, if you will, because it went against um, what was the perspective that you had to have, and this idea that you were nothing but a thought, that nothing around you was real. And it made me think back to your comments earlier when you were talking about being here and being there and everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Because if you were nothing but a thought, how else could you do that? So we're these thoughts, and now I'm thinking about Thoth, the Egyptian goddess. So I thoroughly enjoyed today's story, species, story, medicine. I definitely soaked up the medicine because one thought leads to another reaction, another thought, right? Thoughts lead to thoughts, and thoughts can become dangerous, especially to people who are power and control hungry. They don't like you thinking and being independent. So when you're taking perspective, and when you're transforming concepts and giving it meaning, and you're doing your own critical thinking based on your own conclusions while considering the perspective of others, that is very empowering. That is big time taking charge of your life. And to me, that's very powerful. And just wow. Any thoughts about thoughts?
Thoughts are, information that just, in my opinion, that just comes and goes. And so I can, have the thought of, wow, it's windy outside. Okay. So it's windy. But if I go and if I want to change it to a perspective and go, then I would say, wow, it's windy outside. I better go check on maybe the plants or go check on, these things outside to make sure they're got enough anchoring or they're going to blow away or, do I need to water more because the wind is drying them out faster? You're putting more experience into the thought itself and you're expanding the thought. So perspectives are thoughts as well. It's just you're looking at it differently. And, you know, an example of a thought that is I mentioned in the book where I challenge it and I put it under the chapter of things that we just believe because we're told is, and I've used it a lot on shows, is we look outside and we say the grass is green. That's a thought. We're describing what we see the grass as. But perspective to me is going, well, I'm saying the grass is green because someone told me that's what green looks like and that's what grass looks like. And so, therefore, my perspective is yes, the grass is green. But what if we got that wrong? What if green is really brown or black or, and somebody said, well, scientifically, green is being, the frequency of green is refracting back. And that's why we see green. And to not get into a heated argument, I just said, okay. And when I was off air, when they mentioned it, I was on air. And so off air, I said to myself, but how do we know what the frequency of green is? For all we know, the world around us is like, the Matrix. When Neo breaks the Matrix and sees everything for what it is, everything is code lines. And I go, what if this is the real reality? Everything is frequency coding. And I made the observation at the end of this section talking about it, and I said, you know, here's an interesting point. I will accept the grass is green because it looks better and is more aesthetically pleasing than these codes. And I'm okay with that. I understand it may not actually be green, but I'm okay with that. And so it was my way of saying to people, some of the things that we blindly accept as truths, we don't have to change. We can still accept them and be okay. We just have to be aware that we're doing that. That's what I was trying to drive home into that point.
Reminds me of where I'm at in my journey right now is moving beyond categories, and yet I require categories so people know what I'm talking about. Like angel ET. I don't know the difference anymore, but I use angel and I use ET because people typically know what I'm talking about, right? James asked a question a while back. What about aspects of the multiverse aspect of multiple selves? What about aspects of the multiverse aspect of multiple selves?
So this is an SSP aspect, and what it is we have alters that are our consciousness that's been splintered off and is being used. And so they are running timelines of their own. And we don't know about them, or if we do know about them, we are at choice to merge ourselves back into one, in which case we then have to figure out, I think, in that moment, which timeline is the right timeline. And the reason I say it that way is because we are in the belief that we are prime zero, the original me. Well, I can be a fractal of a me on another planet who's the real me, who's awakening to this reality and awakening to the fact that there are multiple me's all over. And so I don't know who the real, true, honest, original copy of Michael is. I can only operate under, I'm the Michael I am right now, and this Michael that's over here doing this, I am at choice to say, hey, I'm ready to bring you into the fold. Let's operate together. Let's merge ourselves back into one, in which case, when you're needed over there, I can choose to have you operate in that timeline. So both timelines are going simultaneously. Or I can say, you served well over there, but that service is no longer needed. It doesn't serve here, and it doesn't serve the greater good here. So we're going to end this timeline and we're going to bring you in. And I know it sounds like, in a way, that we're creating mass murder by ending timelines. But what people have to understand are these are not naturally formed timelines. So when the program splinter, say, for example, I get splintered in a program, and a Palladian may say, hey, we need Michael, his consciousness, to do this timeline, this mission here. So a timeline is created for me to do that mission. And then when it's over, that timeline will disappear and be re-assimilated into the whole consciousness. Now, that's how we get around, if we had to hurt someone, we're not actually going, like, I'm not going to their house and committing this crime here. It's on another timeline in another dimension. And so that's how we, the individual, like, I'm not responsible for what my alter did. It was under influence, it was under somebody else's control that they bred me, created me to do a specific task, and I did that task. I did not go and say, hey, I'm going to create an alter that's going to go and become this super awesome assassin, and I'm going to rack up a whole bunch of kills, and, put myself on the black market. That's not what we're talking about. That's not an alter. That's just you being here and you doing what I guess you feel you are drawn to do, in which case, happy to you, but lose my number and lose my info. Don't come looking for me. I don't want to meet you. But yeah, and so that's what I think. I'm hoping that's what James is referencing, is there is a multiverse out there because timelines have been manufactured and created to fulfill specific purposes for specific people, and then those timelines disappear and we're just left with memories of stuff that may or may not happen. And I'm now starting to wonder if this is where Mandela effects are coming from, or people with programs that are starting to remember things and going, wait a minute, this isn't the right timeline, this isn't the right this, and it's timelines merging, and somehow some people remember the old timeline versus the new. And so I'm hoping that's what he was asking. If not, I just gave everybody a lesson in the secret space program for fun.
I find it very fascinating. And as you were talking, I thought about many things. And one thing I thought about was, well, what about our timeline? Like, who's to say, you know, we're an illusion, right? Like, this whole entire universe, my timeline, you, us meeting today, having this conversation, might just fade away because check off list, somebody else out there was able to be successful in whatever. Like, it's really fascinating. Alien ATUK, wishing you a happy birthday. And James has other comments here too. I'll just rewind here and read them. So at one point, James was thinking, what about like a microphone when a couple things come together and cause feedback? And that made me think about cotton candy. Like, the cotton candy floaties are there, but at some point you need to take the stick and let the wind swirl and the cotton candy collects and sticks to each other. So that's what I thought about. How about you, Michael?
So I think in that aspect, what is going on is you have the energy of the moment, and somebody else is in their moment. And when the two meet, if you're on the same frequency, you can either blend and create harmony, or you can create feedback and it sounds horrible. And for the sensitive ears, it's like, oh my, it's the worst sound in the world. But I would say, that is an aspect of, if we look at it as, two alters, two timelines, and both feel their timeline prime, and both want to exist, but not merge or not connect, then you're going to have this conflict all the time of going, back and forth and trying to figure out who is who, what is what. And they're going to keep crossing paths. And those moments where they pass, those are the moments where I feel like the Mandelas come in. Is, let's say, for example, the namesake. So I have a timeline where Mandela's alive to the 90s, a timeline where Mandela died in the 80s. They hit a point and they merge, and the timeline from the 80s is running the show for a while. So Mandela died in the 80s. Then there's an announcement in the 90s, Mandela died. And I'm like, wait, he's already dead. How can he die twice? And that's where the timeline from the 90s re-merges with the 80s and now takes and runs the show and says, yeah, you think he died in the 80s, but we're going to accept that he died in the 90s. And so now it goes on. And so how it works is, now let's say, I'm going to the store and I'm like, wait, where's the cornucopia on this label? Boom, the other timeline sweeping in and saying, you're right, there's supposed to be this. And so that's how the timelines are going to constantly be going back and forth, and you're going to be jumping timelines. And that's where the confusion is going to come in, because you're going to constantly be going, what's real and what's not real, because they have paperwork that says there was never a cornucopia, but yet I have physical evidence here there is a cornucopia. So who's telling the truth? Well, both are, because they're both different timelines. And so that's where our mind is not designed to actually comprehend multiple timelines, multiple scenarios in one solid moment. And so that's why we keep jumping, is it's the mind's way of protecting itself. And that's why you could go to a movie and be like, man, I really love the butter popcorn here. And you're like, and you take one bite and you're like, this is the worst popcorn ever. Because you jump to a timeline that doesn't like that movie's buttered popcorn, and you think, what's going on? Why do I not like this all of a sudden? And there's all these little nuances that tell us we've jumped timelines, but we don't pay attention to them. We just write them off as going, well, maybe the cook, burnt the butter this time and that's why I don't like it. And so we'll create stories to take us out of it. And there is, the problem with the timelines is there are factions in the programs. Just, I'll share this real quick, that are literally going back in time and changing events, like physically changing what happened and rewriting history And that's why everybody's energy is so off the scale, is because major changes are being taken, but there are units in the programs that are actually there to fix these and make them, correct them, and not allow the change to be made and try to remedy it. And yeah, and what's interesting is, we live in a world where, because of free will, everything has to be disclosed. And if you look at Star Trek, well, Star Trek Enterprise, that series, the main focus of it was the temporal wars between factions. Well, that was their way of saying, yes, we are in a temporal war. We are physically actually doing this, or other things. And so, if you know what you're looking at and you know how to understand what you're seeing, there's a lot of answers out there, but it's presented in a way to where, if I was to say to, like, Gina, for example, who doesn't watch Star Trek, I'm assuming, would sit there and go, well, that's a TV show. And that's just entertainment. That's what TV is. Well, you're going to miss the truth of what's there. And there is, the fact too of, a lot of people look at the original Star Trek series, all those different aliens. We didn't have makeup artists back then to the scale we do today. So when you look at a lot of the aliens, we just look at them and go, wow, that was a great makeup job. They didn't have that tech really back then to make them look like they do today. And a friend of mine who's been a guest pointed out that to me and said, "You think those aliens really wore masks when they didn't have the ability to make masks?" I mean, you had Mission Impossible where they would peel a face off, but it was still human. They didn't have all those like ridges and all those antenna or different, ears or different things. And so she pointed out and said, if you really want to know what some of these races look like, look at the background characters of Star Trek, the original series, because they didn't have the capability to make these elaborate face masks. And it's like, you think about it and you go, oh my God, that's true. Whoa, that's really what they look like. Wow. And it really transforms how disclosure has been around us all along, but we never looked at it.
There's so many points that you made. I don't even know where to start. Like costumes, you're right. You nailed it. Even like old school Easter bunny costumes, they're kind of on the scary side. Now today they're very, fun looking. Um, Anything original, I think, looks creepy, because that was the authentic. And even cartoons were invented for adults. And like old school cartoons are on the freaky looking side, because it's based on the direct images that came from the artist, and they're freaky. And where did those images come from, right? Now we can get into a conversation about synchronicity, um, throughout the world, where people have the same drawings and whatnot. um, I thought about deja vu when you were talking, like maybe there's deja vu going on when timelines are getting crossed. um, I also thought
Absolutely.
ground zero at one point, because it seems like this ground zero energy is very top secret. But it seems like, I don't have a science background, but it seems like if things are at ground zero, then it's like things are calm and neutral and ready to manifest. And it's like being in a cartoon where you want a broom, you have a broom. Don't need it anymore, it's gone. And when you have ground zero energy, then you don't have a need for gas or cars, because you just jump to this timeline, you just space travel, time travel. you know. And I don't watch scary movies because, full disclosure, I can't handle them. Can't handle scary movies. But I do feel there is a full disclosure going on in some way, shape, or form, and I don't believe that there's only one all. I think like everything that everybody's talking about to some degree has some kind of truth in it. That all of the stories to some degree are true. You know.
Right.
Um,
And
um,
an interesting way to look at it too is we can say, well, some things I can understand, or how they pulled the wool over our eyes, but not everything. And I like to point out at times and go, looking at the screen, we have virtual backgrounds, and how that is because, like, I can hold this up here and you can see it. Now it's disappeared and I'm holding nothingness out to my right, but yet my hand still shows me holding something. That's the illusion of our reality, is we're seeing it right before us, but our filter says there's nothing there because I can't see anything. But if you look at my hand is in the position of holding something, but your eyes are telling your brain there's nothing there. And if I move the image, all of a sudden it's there, and it's like, oh, that's the magic that we have in our world. And when I say magic, I'm talking the MAGIC magic, is the illusion of, they commonly call it the misdirection magic of, look at this hand while this hand is doing this, and you're, missing this because you're focused because I told you to focus here.
wow. Serious dreams. You think it's the hypnagogic state or bypassing it? Questions are starting to pile up in my mind. Yeah, me too. It's like one question after another. And I never heard of that word before, hypnagogic, until Saturday when Suze Gallagher brought it up, because there's so many different ways to describe different dreams and different ways of thinking that it gets overwhelming. And uh, what did I write here? I wrote a lot of things. Um,
Well, I can say I'm not familiar
I
enough to
brain
make
farted it
a
out.
comment about it because I only heard about it too on Saturday. So I don't want to enter a theory or a comment about it because I want
Sounds
I
like
want
you
to
were
get some
inspired
more
by Suze
info.
Gallagher.
Yeah.
Suze Gallagher. And James Whittakis, I think it has to do with the Schumann frequency rising, or as I say, the background operating frequency. Schumann, that's the show where, was that Jim Carrey, where he thought
No, that's
everybody,
Truman.
oh, dude, see, that's how you know. And then
So I can
Anchor Haven's
explain the
commenting,
Truman real quick if you want.
what, what was that, sorry?
I said I can explain the Schumann resonance if you want real quick.
Sure, yes. I was going to say, you should just clarify it, because what am I thinking of? The Trump show? I don't even know.
Truman Show is what you're thinking.
Ah, Truman Show. That's what it is. Yes. Yes.
So the Schumann resonance is the resonance of the energy that the earth is generating. And so when the sun is sending us flares, the Schumann resonance rises because it's sending up a shield and it's protecting us from the harmful wave that's coming. And so everybody's energy gets thrown out of whack because all of a sudden it's like the energy of the world around us just went into crazy mode. And a way I could describe it in an easier, maybe to understand way, is I watch the anime Dragon Ball Z sometimes, and there's a scene where they're trying to strengthen themselves and make themselves stronger. So they go into this place where they can crank the gravity to be like 100 times Earth's gravity. And you can see them straining to lift themselves up. Well, that would be the same as saying the Schumann has blacked out. It is so high that we cannot function and operate normally, and those that are sensitive are going to be knocked on their butt, where people who are less sensitive can maybe muddle their way through and be like, and emotions come up, and dark nights get triggered with the effect of the Schumann resonance because it brings stuff up. And if it's something that's been buried and the universe and you is like, hey, we can't bury this anymore, we're going to make you look at it. It's going to use the high Schumann resonance and say, look, no more are you going to say later. It's now. And so it's the energy of every living thing on the planet operating on a single, I guess, realm or imagined existence, as we put it, that's keeping us on this planet and allowing us to operate and move around. And so as it's low, we're okay. Some people get headaches when the Schumann goes up a little bit higher than normal, or groggy and are sleepy and are drawn in. And some people who never get sick can all of a sudden get a cold or the flu, and there's like no rhyme or reason. And well, it's because we're all affected by the environment around us, and the environment is controlled by solar factors, and not a lot of people think about that, how connected we are to the cosmos, because the cosmos has a huge impact on us. And I like to watch Stefan Burns and Sarah Starr Official on TikTok and YouTube, because they will sit there and they will say, hey, were you having a headache today? Did you know the Schumann went up? Well, did you know there was a solar wind that came through? So it's like you start to put all the pieces together and go, okay, note to self, I need to watch out for these days. I need to watch out for these events, and start to plan around them. And so it's all about awareness and the environment around us is the Schumann.
I wasn't aware. I'm aware of the cyclical natures of time and energy, but I wasn't aware of the Schumann. So I'm gonna have fun googling that after, because I feel like a lot of what you just said resonated with me. Like, without going into stories, but like when I got spooked by Jaguar, like Alberto Villoldo told me that that's because the power animals were stalking me, and I was like, oh, that doesn't exactly make me feel any better. But like, it was because the time was up. Like, you can't, like the hero's journey, the time is now. You can't keep waiting anymore. The grace period is over. Wow. And then at some points, James was clarifying that what Suze Gallagher was talking about was just before you go to sleep and just when you wake up, that's when you're in that hypnotic state. And I forget now what it was called. The chat scrolled on me there. Hypnagogic state. And James wrote some interesting comments here. I think computer CPU over time, as they have increased the operating frequency of CPUs so they can access more things or higher levels of data as the rising Schumann frequency. And then Sirius Dreams is commenting implants, like some sort of trickery, like put something in my field or screen, kind of astral fielding. I mean, like, this conversation goes on and on and on, right? But
Right.
Michael, just we wrap up, I wrote down the moon and I wrote down time travel, but you already talked about time travel a lot. But in one of your books, you talked about going to Egypt, and I forget now, was that a dream or did you time travel there? And do you time travel in this book? I meant to ask that like 2 hours ago.
So I actually did go to Egypt physically. And so those experiences I physically had there, I do also go to astral traveling there at times if I feel drawn or feel like I need to learn something or remember something. But the thing about the moon that I bring up in the book, you mentioned the moon, is so we live in a world where I know from elementary school the moon only was up during the nighttime, not during the daytime, and broke off from the earth when something hit it and created the moon. Well, in my study of the moon and stuff about it is the Zulu tribe has pre-lunar knowledge where the moon was not there, or the pre-Columbians have tribal information that says the moon arrived and then we were in awe. The indigenous people have pre-moon or pre-lunar time knowledge, and the Greeks even had a name for tribes, and the Romans too. And so as I started looking at this and going, you know, the moon being a foreign object put into place sounds like this is conspiracy theory 101. But then I start to go, wait a minute. We have the Mediterranean, we have Africa, South America, Central America, North America, all talking about pre moon time. There is no way they got together and said, hey, let's pull the wool over everybody's eyes and, write this fiction and write this up. And so it made me go, we need to seriously look at the moon and go, how is this, what is this really? And they talk about the dark side of the moon all the time. But the thing is, people don't realize we're spinning in space. Mars is spinning. So therefore, the moon should be spinning as well. And if it was, we would see the dark side. So therefore, it is not a natural celestial object because it is fixed in space. And yes, it's orbiting us, but it never rotates. It rotates with us so that it is constant. And now we're seeing it during the daytime and at night, but not every day. And so it really starts to point out, is this holographic? Or is there really an object up there? And if it is, why is it there? And so that's what I propose in the book, is to show all this evidence of, here's this pre-lunar cultures that are far apart. So what do you think is, what is the moon really? And why is it such a threat that it's not a natural object that's been here from the beginning? That it may be 10,000 years old or 20,000 years old. And so that's, kind of one of those elements that you'll find it under the truths that we just blindly accept category. And it's a really long section too. And I apologize for the length, but I wanted to make it really clear that this is, not just one culture here, one culture there, that this is like spread across the globe. And so really need to take a look at this, in my opinion, and really go and say there's something here. May not be, a moon base, or space station, but it's not a piece of the earth either. So what is it really doing up there?
Wow, 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 wow. I know Michael needs to get going. When it comes to the moon, I'm fascinated by it because, like you, that's what I thought, because that's what was told to me, that planet Earth, something broke off and created the moon. But then you listen to folks like David Adair speak, and if you were to knock on the moon, it rings. Well, things ring if they're hollow inside. Why is the moon hollow inside? Is there some kind of city in there, some kind of base? You hear stories about people bringing moon dust back to planet Earth, sprinkling it on some crops. The crops grow big time, right? The moon is tidal locked with us. If it wanted to leave, it can't leave. It's literally stuck with us. And I didn't know about the time before the moon until I went on my own personal journey, learning about David Adair and stuff like that. Because in my dream life, the goldfish dancing on land, there is no moon. It's just the sun. And that's what I do. I track the sun, and I don't mean to, but I end up creating a clock. Um, so this has been very fascinating with me. I feel like, Michael, you could probably just go live on your channel and not have a guest and just be your own guest, taking Q's and A's from the audience, because today people were really enjoying it. So thank you so much. I know there's more questions in the chat, but that's all the time we have for today. Michael sent me a message about half an hour ago telling me he only had 15 minutes left. Thank you so much, Michael, for your time. I really appreciate it. I'll remove you here from this stage. Thank you so much. I appreciate all your time. I feel like I got to rush now. He's got to go. He told me a good half hour ago that he had to go. But let me show you his book again, Deeper Insights into the Mind of Michael. This book might just be, I don't know, like, it might upstage the other ones, because the other ones are kind of like Michael going on his journey and figuring things out. But now, like, book 5 is like really analyzing all of the information. And so thank you to everybody who's participated in the chat today. And I really appreciate everybody's time. Story Species, Story Medicine. Anybody out there has any medicine that they've been targeting, there we go. I'm targeting published authors, but if you're not published yet, who cares, And I also want to remind people, I put it out there on my Buy Me a Coffee this morning, nonverbal communication. There's a lot of authors that do interpretive dancing, or they play music, or they paint or draw pictures. And so if that's your form of communication, absolutely, I lovingly invite you to be a guest on Story Species, Story Medicine, Extra Strength. So thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you got your medicine. It's the best prescription out there, and it's absolutely free. Gina Virginia Casella here, wishing everybody a fantastic day, and we'll see you next time. Take care and bye for now.